never to install a bell in their church. The building of that Methodist church called the Baptist in town to break one of the rules of the Bible. They got jealous and wanted Henry Flagler to build their new Baptist church. Henry said, "I'll make you a deal. You raise $10,000 by yourself in less than a year, and I'll give you the rest of the money you need." He gave them about $11,000, and yes, for about $21,000, they built the ancient City Baptist Church in 1887. And where is that church? Just follow the yellow brick church. Follow the yellow brick church. Follow. Check out that beautiful bell tower. Doesn't that look more like something Rapunzel would hang her hair down out of? There is no place for the sound of a bell to come out of that bell tower, because Henry Flagler also made them sign the agreement never to install a bell. You see, Henry wanted them to have a chance of winning the Nobel Prize. Come on. Come on. He was a religious man, and that's why he built so many churches around town. Henry's church that he built was built in 1889, and it's coming up here on our right. This is Flagler's Memorial Presbyterian Church. Now, sadly, it is a memorial to his daughter and granddaughter who both passed away from complications of childbirth. Henry was distraught over the loss of his daughter and granddaughter. He asked that this church be built in their memory, and he had one special request. He insisted that this church be opened by the one-year anniversary of his daughter's death. Think about that, 1889. Opening this church only took 361 days. On that one-year anniversary, Henry moved the remains of his daughter and granddaughter into a single tomb inside this church. Henry was buried in here when he passed away in 1913. And also along the way, he had the remains of his first wife put into a tomb here in St. Augustine. Calm down, it was after she died. Actually, sadly, Henry's first wife was the reason he came to Florida. She was dying. The doctors knew it, and they told him that maybe the climate here in Florida would help her live out her last days in relative comfort. So he came to Jacksonville. He loved Florida so much that he fell in love with it. He also fell in love with his first wife's nurse, and she became his second wife. Don't worry. Season here at Henry's Hotel. This is now home to Flagler College. The hotel closed in the 1960s, opened back up in 1968 as Flagler College for Girls. By 1972, the girls must have been getting bored. They said, "Where's all the boys?" They made it co-ed in 1972. But let's go back to when this opened in 1888 as a hotel. You know what it had? Electricity. 4 years before the White House had electricity, this was an electric hotel here in St. Augustine. The electrical system was installed by Thomas Edison and his workers. And there was a big problem with Henry Flagler's electric hotel. You know what that problem was? Henry Flagler's guests. I'm going to let you go first, sir, on the bicycle. Flagler's guests were afraid of electricity. It was new to them. And lots of them showed up here in St. Augustine, and they would not turn on and off their hotel room lights. Henry actually went out and hired people called switchers. And they got paid 75 cents a day to do one job. Well, two jobs. Turn on and off hotel room lights. 75 cents a day in 1888, when your average coal miner in Pennsylvania was only making about 65 cents a day. This was a pretty good job if you could get it right here at Mr. Flagler's Hotel. Ding, ding, young lady, ding, ding. All right. See those stained glass windows on the curved section of the building? They're hard to see from the outside because they're covered in bulletproof glass. Nobody wants those destroyed. Those were designed by the famous Louis Comfort Tiffany of the famed Tiffany's in New York City. That's the world's largest intact collection of Tiffany stained glass windows, and that's why the college has them insured for right around $35 million. You know what they do behind those windows every day? They serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That is Flagler College's dining hall behind that stained glass window. And yes, they have very strict rules against food fights in there. Imagine throwing an apple, missing your target, and watching it fly in slow motion at $35 million worth of your scholarship. Yeah, bye-bye, college. For mommy and daddy. So I've talked a lot. In front of the main entrance of Henry's Hotel over here on the right is a statue of Mr. Flagler. That statue was made when Henry Flagler was 53 years old. And at 53 years old, he was already one of the wealthiest men in our country. I am currently 55. And I'm not one of the wealthiest men in the country, and that's why I design any fun into that hotel. No indoor swimming pool, no tennis courts, nothing. Henry knew that was a problem. You know how he solved that problem of his boring hotel? He went across the street and built this second hotel right here. It was called the Hotel Alcazar. It opened the same year as the first one, 1888. And I'm going to tell you all the fun Henry included at the Alcazar in one breath. Give me a second. Because last time Henry built a tunnel connecting his two hotels so he didn't have to be seen crossing the street. Alright, so listen, I told you this place had an indoor swimming pool when it opened in 1888. If you look up ahead, the curved section of roof right there is over the shallow end of that swimming pool. The deep end, one whole block away on the other side of the building. If you want to go swimming in there, don't worry if you don't have your bathing suit. They got lots of railings to throw your clothes over. No, don't do that. You'll get arrested. You can go in the swimming pool without a bathing suit because there's no water in it anymore, but there is a cafe in the middle of where the deep end used to be. All right, I just realized something. I'm a certified teacher in the state of Florida, and I have not asked you one test question yet. What's wrong with me? That's the funnest part of my job, watching kids get stuff wrong. But you guys are going to get this right. Because when those former slaves in St. Augustine heard they were given their freedom, they were also given something else. They were given all of this land on the south end of town. It was farmland and woods. They were told, we want you to stay in St. Augustine. Take this land, build your homes here. We're not charging you a penny. Welcome back to St. Augustine as freemen. And they built this beautiful neighborhood that they named Lincolnville. This is northern Florida's largest collection of Victorian-era homes. Some gorgeous houses around here. Like the house on the next corner, the gray one, that was built for one of the great-granddaughters of President Thomas Jefferson. His great-granddaughter lived right here in Lincolnville for a handful of years. But this is now home to actually a restaurant called The Preserved. Great little restaurant in there. Hello. I'm not going to lie to you. Up until about 4 weeks ago, you could have purchased this fixer-upper right here. It had been for sale, but it finally sold. You know what its asking price was? $799,000. That is a historic home here in the city, and it finally did sell. Looks like they already started cleaning the yard up pretty nicely. We're going to make a right turn here. You guys are going to do much better on my next teacher question because the answer is shrimping. So, others you can't see that says whiskey, rum, gin, and vodka. They'd go into that building looking for ice. They'd start drinking heavily, forget all about their shrimp, and let it rot on their boats. All right, that's not the truth. They come to this building to buy ice. Look up on the top on the front. This was the city's ice plant around 1900. Now it's home to the St. Augustine Distillery. They make whiskey, rum, gin, vodka, and bourbon. And guess what? They offer a free tasting tour. That's right, you can taste what they make absolutely free. And your kids are welcome on the tour, but they only get to taste some lemonade that gets made in the tourist destination. We also consider him like the second founder of St. Augustine because he revived this tiny little falling apart town when he showed up with his hotels. And you might be wondering, hey, where did the train stop in Henry's day? Well, I can tell you for sure it stopped at the train station. San Sebastian Winery, just like the distillery, the San Sebastian Winery does offer free tasting tours. Right across the street from what used to be the railroad depot, you see 3 matching buildings. Those were Henry Flagler's offices for his railway and hotel companies, their entire family. Hey! You want to try really good chocolate? That yellow brick building is a chocolate factory, and they offer a tour. It's not free, but that's the Whetstones Chocolate Factory. That's a local family who makes chocolate here since the early 1970s. You know who they used to make fudge for? The Walt Disney Corporation. They had the contract to make all of the fudge sold on Main Street, USA, when Disney World first opened. Back in, what, 1971, I think that was. All right, folks, the trumpet by the year after year after year. Now, if you want to be extra nice to me, could you add one word to the review? Could you add the word handsome to that, please? I started this joke about 2 years ago because I got 3 teenage sons who don't think Dad's very good looking anymore, old and wrinkled and gray. Every time somebody jokes about handsome Alex, I read it out loud to the kids at the dinner table. I'm like, look, boys, it was on the internet. It's got to be true. You have to believe it. My wife just says, can you please stop embarrassing the family with this handsome thing, please? But she's not here to stop me right now. So handsome Alex if you love the tour, regular old Alex if you love the tour, and if you didn't like the tour, I still want to hear from you on TripAdvisor. Remember, my name was Felicia. All right, let's get back to the history. Let's talk about Lincolnville in the early 1960s. In the early 60s, Lincolnville was still mostly an African-American community, and because of that, there were things in town the kids in Lincolnville wanted to do they were told they couldn't, simply because of the color of their skin. Well, listen, in 64, there was a Woolworths department store in town, and it had a lunch counter. And there was a group of high school young men from here in Lincolnville, very brave young men, who thought they should have a right to eat at that lunch counter, but they were told they couldn't. So they got involved with a dentist in town named Dr. Haling. This guy was basically running Florida's civil rights movement in the early 60s, and Dr. Haling convinced them that it would be a good idea to walk into that Woolworths one day in 1964, sit down and order a meal, and those young men knew what they were risking. They were risking their health, their safety, their lives, and getting arrested, and much of that is exactly what happened. Well, that prompted their friend Dr. Haling to call a good friend of his. You might have heard the good friend's name, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He called him, he said, Martin, I need you to come to St. Augustine. So in 64, Dr. King came here a couple times. In fact, one of those trips lasted about 2 weeks, and on that 2-week trip, he led 2 different marches on this very street right here that we're crossing at the stop sign. That's why we renamed it Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue. Now listen, people were always threatening Dr. King. We know that, right? For his own safety, when he stayed in St. Augustine, he slept in a different house every night of his 2-week stay. We were never told ahead of time where he was going to be staying. I say we, I wasn't born until 2 years after that. But we found out after he left that he did spend one night at this white 2-story house with the maroon trim right here. I'm going to get a little bit quiet because this is somebody's house. But you can see the Freedom 2 houses back off of this corner. The house is still there today. Now, remember how good we are at naming things, like the gate at the northern end of the city was called the Northern City Gate? Guess what we call the house where Prince Murat lived? The Prince Murat House. We are so creative. Hey, listen, I'm going to take a long story and make it really short. Henry Flagler, his friend, built a 3rd hotel in town. He was about to open up, but he had no furniture because the furniture was being delivered by his friend Henry Flagler's railroad, and the railroad never showed up with the furniture. Henry felt bad for the missing furniture. He paid his friend Franklin Smith back for the furniture so Franklin could get his hotel open, but Franklin said, thank you, Henry, but I've got to file bankruptcy. I needed bodies in those hotel rooms quicker. Henry said, I'll bail you out of your bankruptcy and I will buy the Casa Monica Hotel from you. That's this one coming up here on our right. What happened about 3 days after they signed the purchase agreement? 3 trees stood up the long story about Henry and his friend disagreeing over whose name should be on this hotel that they were supposed to be building together. So this was Henry's 3rd hotel built by his friend Franklin Smith. The Casa Monica is also the only one of Henry's 3 hotels in town that's still in operation as a hotel today. Hey, check out the bell towers on Henry's 1st and 2nd hotels. Are those bell towers? No. Did Henry like bells? No. No, those are water towers. Henry tapped into a well about 7 miles northwest of St. Augustine, built about a 7-mile-long pipeline and had water pumped into those towers. There were tanks up in those towers, and then it would be gravity-fed down throughout the hotel rooms. You know what else he had? A fireplace in every single guest room. You see anywhere near 500 listening through the fireplace. So in colonial times, St. Augustine was Florida's capital. Long before our capital was in Tallahassee, the Spanish colonial capital, British colonial capital, second Spanish colonial capital, and U.S. colonial capital were right here. And the governors lived and worked in a house right here on our left. That's the most recent version of the governor's office and governor's house there on my left, right across the street from the Central Plaza in the middle of town. Central Plaza was like the mall in colonial times. It was the open-air market right here in town. That Woolworths department store where those young men tried to order a meal in 1964, that's this yellow Wells Fargo building here on the right. You can still see the Woolworths name engraved on the door handles. So we're going to wait while that green trolley pulls out and 0. They're a good company too. They run their tours a little different. With theirs, you can hop on and hop off at different things through it. Now, on this street for a while, the locals called Hospital Street because there was a Spanish Royal Hospital in this part of town in colonial times. We don't have that hospital anymore, but these days we do have the